Hi everyone, it's Jackie back again to finish this page in Fantasy Tiny Homes, the newly re-released version of Fantasy Tiny Homes by RJ Hampson with the updated images in it. And I had quite a good response from people that you would like to see me finish the rest of this page, so I'm back today to do that. I've got all the pencils that I had out yesterday still here, so I'll continue with those colours for now. I did do a little bit of research into observatories, and they are indeed white, a lot of them. So I've decided that I'd like to do these domes here as glass. But because it's not quite night time yet, I'm going to suggest that there might be a little bit of a glow coming from within until perhaps they're going to do some stargazing. So I'm just going to do a little suggestion of a glow of light, and that was the Sicilian yellow. And what I will do is come back with the I think it was cadmium yellow I had yesterday on here. I can't quite remember now. It doesn't matter anyway. We'll go for sherbet lemon. This is almost a bit like a fluorescent sort of yellow. So we'll just do a little bit of that sort of extra bright glow around that. And then I did see that there were some examples of observatories that have the glass, and the glass almost had sort of a greenish tinge to it. So I thought that might actually work quite well with the colours that we have. So I'm going to use spring green to do that really lightly. It's very, very pale. I'm just sort of using quite a wet brush and only picking up the tiniest bit of green on the end. And what I'm going to do is the furthest part of the dome away from that light source, just a little hint of that to suggest that there is indeed a little bit of colour there. And I might even use a little touch of deep indigo, which is the colour that I've got for the sky there. Just the tiniest hint of that, as if you're seeing it reflected or maybe even partly through that glass roof. And then there's a little fraction bit in there that I haven't got any colour on at all, that's white, and I'm going to leave that white. Now, that is very, very white. So what I'm going to do, I think I'm going to use the mustard, which I had out yesterday. And I'm just going to, again, with a wet brush, just pick up a little bit of colour. And I'm going to do those bricks that are around the window like they're a feature brick, but only sort of, you know, that pale coloured brick that you can get, almost like a sandstone sort of effect brick. And I'm going to do that around the windows and the door frames, because I feel like if I leave the building white, that might be a little bit too much white if I did everything left white, and it would look like I just haven't bothered to paint, you know, the whole picture. So a little hint of that in there, little touches of it here and there. I think, you know, that foundation sort of brick area is okay to have a little bit more colour in it. And I had Payne's Grey yesterday, so I've got the Payne's Grey here still. And we're just going to put a little suggestion of that Payne's Grey over the top of the wet mustard. and they're sort of blending to sort of bring, you know, it's an odd colour that it's making. It's not grey, it's not brown, it's kind of in between. And I'm going to stick with the mustard just to do a bit more colour on here. I want it to look like it might be wood that's on there. And I'm going to leave the window frames white, I think, but I'd like some colour on the doors. And because we've got the Shiraz down here on his waistcoat, to introduce it up here in that top part of the picture, I'm going to actually use Shiraz for the door. Now once again, Hamish is here with me. I got a little bit discouraged yesterday. His progress sort of went a bit backwards yesterday when it came to walking on the lead, and I had a lot of trouble to try and get him back home again because he got spooked by something. Not quite sure what it was that spooked him, but he was not having a bar of anything, and it was really, really hard for me to get him back home on my own. And I got a little bit discouraged. He also chewed up a few things that he shouldn't have done. And he's got very sharp teeth. He keeps destroying toys that are supposed to be indestructible. He likes those sort of rubbery, almost plasticky sort of consistency type toys, and he's just pulling them apart really quickly, and I've got to have eyes in the back of my head that he's not swallowing something that he shouldn't do. So I actually did get a little bit discouraged yesterday because I felt like everything was going backwards. And yet today had a bit of a rough start with him, as in he was sick after he'd had his breakfast, which meant that he hadn't had time to digest the medication that we have to put in his food. And I thought, oh no, we're going to have a bad day if he's not had chance to digest that medication. But we've had 2 very short walks within our street. I just keep going up and down the same street that we live on so that he can get used to it. And also, if something goes wrong and he just shuts down, at least I'm not very far from home. And so we've been practicing twice today on the lead. He did get a bit spooked when a neighbour came out. He's not very good with strangers. He's just terrified of everybody but me at the moment. And apart from that, he's done great. He's been really good. I went out for a little while to my craft group, and I came home expecting there to be annihilation and devastation in the garden, but he actually hadn't done anything naughty, so that was great. And he was very, very excited to see me, so that's been good. We've had a play. He's got rid of some energy, and so he's now just sitting quietly while I do this, which is good. So what I'm doing there is just gradually building that colour up. I don't want it to get too strong. I certainly don't want this to overtake the bottom part in terms of interest. So I think that's as dark as I'm going to go with that building in the background. I've gone over some edges there, but I will fix them up either with an acrylic paint pen or a gel pen or some sort of metallic pen even. So that's okay, I can live with that. And I'm going to put a little bit of grey onto this lion statue here now. So thank you to everyone who left a lovely comment yesterday. It is really great feedback to get to know that you are actually enjoying the videos and you are understanding the points that I'm trying to get across. So that's great that I'm actually making myself understood, because I was a little bit worried I might not be explaining things well enough for you all. So thank you to those of you who watched and commented yesterday. It really is greatly appreciated to have that feedback. And a lot of you did say that you would like to see this page finished. So I would have worked on it today anyway. So it was good to know that you would all like to see it. So I'm recording it for you. And there's been some great suggestions of ideas of things that people would like to see. So that is good. It gives me an idea of what I can work on in terms of I'd like to continue working on pages that I get enjoyment out of. But if I can structure it in a way that I get enjoyment and you also get some tips and helpful ideas for what you're doing, it doesn't become a chore, and it actually is, multitasking at its best, which, given my time constraints at the moment, it's great to be able to do, two things at once and actually feel like I'm achieving something. So all I'm doing there is just sort of, a few sort of ideas of shadows. I wanted these arches, the statue, to look like they are some sort of stone or cement or concrete. So I'm happy with that. And I will just put some colour onto those trees there in the background. Instead of adding a new colour in, what I think I might do is actually use the light olive, but I'm going to use it a bit darker than I did for the grassed area there. And again, I'm not looking to get a completely solid, saturated, even look to these trees, because that is not how trees look. So what I'm doing is using the wet brush or damp brush, lifting that pigment off a little bit heavier than I have done up till this point. And where I put that colour down to start with is much deeper, obviously, and then as I work down or across, it's going to get lighter. And what I want to do is just emphasise some of those deeper areas and leave some lighter areas, just to suggest that there are indeed texture and shadows, and this is not a flat, even surface. So that's looking pretty good. I think this sort of rolling hill at the back here is a little bit pale, so that's a bit too much colour. I've just wiped the brush a bit cleaner, and then I'm just going to spread that about so that it's not such an obvious, blob of colour. And the same there, just wipe it off, and then with the wet brush, lift a bit of extra colour off. And then that way it's not too heavy and solid and dark. And I've gone onto there a little bit, which is a bit of a nuisance, but because it hasn't dried, we can lift some of that back off. And I can come back with the gel pen or a white pencil there anyway. Alright, so the jacket down here obviously needs a lot more colour in it. So that was the deep indigo. So we're going to start to build some of this colour up and make it a little bit more punchy. Because obviously working on that area now has made this area look much lighter and recede when it should be the other way around. This is the bit that we want in focus. and the background should recede a bit. So if we just deepen the values of the colours up here, strengthen it all up, we will be able to reinstate this as the interesting part of the picture to grab the attention or grab the eye, and then the eye can flow through to the rest. Now I want those lapels to be a little bit lighter than the jacket, but not as light as they currently are. So the main lot of colour off my brush is going onto the coat or the jacket, and now I'm just going to brush ever so lightly a little bit extra onto the lapel, so it's not quite so glaringly obvious that it's lighter. And what I'm thinking I'll do with these buttons is I will come back with the gold metallic, gold or silver, I don't know, we'll make that decision at the end when we see everything finished, what colour it needs to be. And these trousers need a lot more colour on them. And because I've already got that layer down there, where I'm just sweeping that colour over the top of it, it was deeper here and lighter there. So that one colour, one sweep of colour has gone over it, but it's still maintained that lighter area and darker area because the ink underneath is dried and it's not moving now. So that is the good thing of these Inktense pencils, is once that first layer has dried, you can do other things on top of it and you're not going to disturb that colour that's under there. And let's have a look now. I think it's looking a little bit dull down here, so I'm going to just add a bit of red into the mix. And I think I'll use, not crimson, I'll use chili red. And I'm just going to make his bow tie red. And I think I might even put the red there for his book. You know, suggesting that perhaps that is a red leather bound book. Only for the reason that the rest of the colours are quite muted there, and I'd like a little bit of interest to start popping down here. And that might be enough of that for now. I'm going to bring in some tangerine, which I'm going to add to the cat because I'd like him to look more like a ginger. And also with that I'm going to add the cadmium yellow. And I'm just using the damp brush again to lift the colour off. There's no point soaking the paper down here, it would just bleed everywhere and end up making a right mess. Wetting the paper is great when you want wide bands of colour or washy colour. It's great to wet that paper first, but when you've got a very small area that you want to keep tightly controlled, I suggest not doing that too much. And I'm just going to add a little bit of that in there to warm that up and a bit more vibrant. I'm thinking that seat, I'm going to use the amber because I don't want it really brown. I don't really want it very orange or yellow, but this amber is a nice sort of in-between colour. So I've got that on there. I'm going to bring a little bit of amber in now and start darkening up some of these bits that would be in shade. And I'm sort of hoping to make this look like it's all different metal rather than wood. So you need to sort of suggest that there's some kind of highlight, because if it's a metallic surface, it's going to be shiny and reflective. So we're going to need to introduce some sort of really bright white highlight into there. Whereas wood will have a highlight on it, especially if it's glossy wood. It will have a highlight, but it's not going to be a really, really vibrant highlight. I always seem to record when that man is coming home on his motorbike, so I'm really sorry for that. But, you know, we have to sometimes just grab the opportunity to record when we can. And it's real life. I mean, this is not the channel that is going to be terribly professional, I'm afraid. Okay, so that up here is still looking rather muted. So where I added the spring green to the glass domes up there, I'm actually going to add just a little bit of that here in the foreground. Because colours in real life, if you're looking at a landscape, the colours that are, the things that are closest to you visually look much more vibrant and brighter, and as things are away in the distance, then the same colour, it could be exactly the same colour, but further away it's going to look much more faded and muted than what it does up close. So I'm not going to do that everywhere, I'm just going to do that in that foreground. And I like how that's looking on the glass, so we'll just add a little extra bit in the bits that may be shadowed. And I think I might also use that shade of green for these leaves on here. Now, as I'm working up, you can see that that area is much deeper, vibrant pigment, and as I'm working away, it's lightening off because there's much less of it on the brush. And with more water coming out with it, it's just diluting and getting lighter the further away I go. And that's kind of a handy tool for that sort of visual flow as well, without any effort at all, really. This thing in here, I'm not entirely sure what to do that. I'm thinking perhaps let's go for the neutral Payne's grey. I'm not really wanting to introduce too many more colours into it. Not in a big way anyway, it needs to be subtle. Now he's going to have a white shirt on. I need to suggest a bit of colour in his face, and all I'm going to do for that is touch a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of amber, and I'm just going to lightly touch that to his hands and his face. Now, I think yesterday I mentioned that I feel this is like a cartoon or a comic kind of illustration, and so I'm not going to try and replicate that this is a real person or that it's a real skin tone or it's indicative of anything that is actually real. It is just purely and simply that, you know, his skin needs to be differentiated from the white background. And so that's why I've chosen to put that colour on there. Okay, I'm bringing that amber down from the telescope down to those legs just to give that continuity again, but because I used the nice cool brown on here yesterday as the base, that's nowhere near as vibrant as it's going to look up there. And the same, I'm just going to do that a little bit on this wooden coat rack here. And I'm not doing the feet because the feet would probably have a bit of more light on them, so they're going to look lighter. Okay, I feel like this is some sort of a wheel, you know, turning wheel that might be perhaps chrome or silver. So I'm going to do that in a neutral sort of grey. There is actually a pencil in the Derwent Inktense range called neutral grey. So I'm just going to put a little hint of that in there. And what I might do is add a little bit of silver gel pen. And I might do the brackets in that grey as well. In real life, you know, perhaps that wouldn't be what a contraption like this would be like, but for an illustration picture sort of standpoint, I want some sort of visual interest and change in it. I don't want it all to look exactly the same. And I think we might do this as an inlay. And I'm actually going to use the Shiraz to make it look like perhaps there's a enamel or some sort of painted inlay on there. And that just then ties this, you know, there's this relation to this and that's related to that. So your eye will travel around. Okay. I always struggle with things like flags. I'm not sure. I think I might leave them white. I know that sort of kind of feels like it's a cop-out that I'm not colouring it, but I'm going to do mustard on the tree trunks here, very, very lightly. And I feel like that neutral grey will be good for doing in between in the shadowy areas here. Again, not too dark, and some of that I'm touching into the tree trunks and letting that bleed across as well. And a little bit like a shadow from the canopy of the leaves. I think the teacup can stay white. I'm going to suggest that he's got a coffee in there. So have I got the oak handy here still? Mustard. Where did the oak go? Did I put it away? No. Seem to have misplaced one of them. So instead of the oak, we'll go for the mustard. Yeah, that can either be like a very dark cup of tea or a very light coffee. And it's a very, very small pattern on there, so I'm going to do that with some sort of pen, I think. That's the other thing, you know, don't make it hard for yourself with a big brush like this is when it comes to fine details. If you want to have really, you know, defined, precise details, then please don't put the pressure on yourself to use a big chunky water brush like I'm doing. I don't really care if my details are a little bit haphazard. I'm okay with that. And so I'm just using the Payne's Grey now to add a few spots and dots where RJ had put some circles to add a bit of interest. I'm actually just doing a few extra. And I'm just going to deepen that a little bit darker, not really, really dark, but just a little bit darker behind there, because then that makes the telescope come forward a little bit more as well. It's not going to be really sort of dark, like as in a black wood, but just with the Payne's Grey, it's enough to just send that picture into the background and keep the telescope to the foreground. Okay, so I'm feeling like that might be almost enough for me. I think just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to do a little bit more in the sky just to show you what can be done. There's that missing oak that I've just found. I'm going to use the deep indigo still, but I'm going to introduce a little bit of bright blue as well. And again, I'm squeezing the brush, letting the water drop into that because I want a very, very loose, random blending of colour and wash. I do not want it to be precise at all. The only precise part of this section is trying to get a crisp edge along the little border here that RJ has drawn. And now I'm going to introduce the bright blue, and I'm just touching the tip into that area that is all wet and has also got a little bit of the deep indigo there. And I'm just touching the brush to the tip and then touching the brush to the wet paper, and I'm just letting that bleed at the moment. And I don't obviously want lots of dots in the sky. So what I will do is, once that's had a chance to bleed a little bit, now I'm gently patting it and I'm letting that bleeding go a little bit further. And so now it's not such obvious dots, but it's blending. And something else that is can be fun to play with is I'm going to, now be careful when you're working. I kind of know my limitations with these things now, but if you're working very wet with lots of water that's going to drip and your pencils are going to drip, don't work over your actual page. Work off to the side, or bring a clean piece of paper towel over onto the rest of your page so that you're not going to have any drips or, bad accidents at this stage, because that's very, very frustrating then. Then you might be forced into doing a black sky to hide a big mess, and it wasn't what you wanted to do, but you're kind of forced to do it to cover up a mistake. So take your pencil away from over the image off to the side. And so that is very wet. And now what I'm going to do, that is the deep indigo. Now I've got a very, very wet brush that I'm using on the bright blue, and I'm going to drop that in, and you can see that that's all bleeding. I'm going to go down here, put some extra deep indigo into here. And I'm thinking that we can make this look like a bit of a cloud, or we can even try and suggest that the moon is coming up there. So deep indigo. And I've got to be careful there going in the railings. And when you've got a nice dark area like that, while it's still quite wet, you can drop just a drop of clean water in there and let it sit, and it may dilute it in a way that you're not expecting. It's a bit random and out of your control, but sometimes you can get some really, really interesting results doing that. Now I'm getting very close to this paper not being able to cope with anymore. It is getting extremely wet here. And that's going to take some time to dry. And what I'm doing here is with the wet brush, just gently dabbing to encourage those bits of colour that are there to bleed where I want them to go. And you can also manipulate big bits of water like that by tipping your book very carefully, and you can try and guide it to go where you want it to go. Now the paper is very cockled and bent, so it's going to come back and it's going to be concentrated in a certain area there. I'm just going to use a bit more bright blue, and I'm taking it off the tip, and I'm just dabbing that in there as well, because that's very wet. You can see how that's blending. You can gently manipulate where it blends by just very gently touching the tip of the brush to that wet pigment, and just, you know, coax it into an area where you want it to go. And I think I might leave that alone to dry. So while that's drying, I can't really do a lot else up there because I risk putting my hands into it. So I'm going to put the Inktense aside and the water brush aside, and I'm going to bring in some pencils down the bottom now. I've got Artex and Prismacolor and some Polychromos random sort of pencils in this pencil case here. So what I'm going to do is a combination of all of those. So I want a really bright yellow sort of to do around where the highlight is going to be on here. So this is called Hansa, Hansa Yellow Light for Artex. And I'm just going to put a bit of that extra bright yellow. I'm going to do a white highlight through here. So I'm just going to do it where the white highlight would be and work back to the darker colour. And a little bit on the top of the, I don't know if that's a sight or whatever that is there, and perhaps in this little section here. I don't feel like it needs to be on there or down the bottom here anywhere else. Next I'm going to use, this is Cadmium Yellow Light. I don't have swatches. If you have swatches, you will be choosing from your swatches, but I'm going visually off of the barrel, the end of the lead and what I know of my set from using it. But if you're not confident, I would suggest, pardon me, I would suggest that you use your swatch sheet if you do have a swatch, or you could have a piece of paper at the side and be scribbling little bits on there. But I've said this many a time, but perhaps I should change the name of my channel, but I really do fly by the seat of my pants, and I sort of do random stuff, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But generally it's because I've worked with the pencils long enough that I feel like I know what the colour is going to be. And I'm also of the thinking that if I make the wrong choice, then I kind of adapt and go with it. But that's my personal working style, so I'm not suggesting that that is the right style, or that perhaps it will be a comfortable style for you to work, but it certainly is the way that I tend to work. I'm going to use now a little bit of goldenrod, and I'm going to go into these areas that are underneath or behind something else and potentially in shadow. So they're going to recede hopefully, and a little bit towards the bottom of the telescope there. Now, people have different ideas about these things, but if I've spent the time to put the Inktense or a watercolour or a marker base, I don't wish to then completely cover it up with my coloured pencil. What my coloured pencil is doing is coming into the areas that are too tight for me to get into with a great big water brush. You know, I can sharpen it. These are quite blunt, but I can sharpen it if I need to get into those tighter areas. And sometimes the pigment in the pencil is just that little bit deeper than what I've got in the wash in the Inktense, and it's enough. I could, of course, always use a dry Inktense pencil and use that and add that too. But see, this is what happens with the Inktense then, because I've weakened the tip. I risk breaking it then. And, you know, it's okay. Sometimes I do it, but on the whole, I would prefer to use a coloured pencil for doing this bit. So you've got options there, but what I'm trying to say, I guess, is you don't need to completely cover that whole background that you've worked so hard at with the Inktense. You don't need to cover it all with the pencil. It's okay to leave some of that to shine through. Now I've just realised that because I have absolutely soaked my page up here, that is actually creeping over to the top of the conservatory roof there. And I don't really want too much of that. So what I'm doing is just pressing the paper towel into that area to dry it. And then the quicker it dries, the less that is going to seep and bleed over that line. Because the paper's dry, it won't do that. Okay. Also, if you feel like you've got too much on there and that's not what you wanted, you can, pardon me, you can always use a tissue or a paper towel, a bit of cotton wool, whatever, to dab at that, and take some of that colour off. I just suddenly realised I've only got one sheet behind there, and because I have got it so wet, there's a very good chance that might even go through one blotter sheet. So there you go, there's an extra one behind. So what I mean by dabbing that is that you can just dab lightly and lift a little bit of the colour off, and that gives you a very soft highlight there as well. Now, I'm not 100% sure that I like what's going on there. So I need to find that bright blue in this increasing pile of pencils that I've got here. Okay. So I want a little bit of that bright blue to just blend that very hard edge that I had of the deep indigo there. And you can tell that the paper is still incredibly wet here. It's actually bleeding quite easily. Okay, that now is probably the absolute maximum that that page can cope with. Remember, it is only Amazon printed book. What you can do with your Inktense as well is when you've got a damp area like that, you can gently touch your tip into that damp area and fill in any spots that need that little bit of extra touching up. So if you haven't quite gone to the edge, or you need a bit of a deeper shadow behind something, you can touch that pencil to the edge like that where it's damp. So that's also something that you can do. And I sometimes like to just do little dots, and you can soften that up. Then if you decide that you don't like that, with a very, very slightly dampened brush, very little water at all, you just gently pat it, and you can soften off any edges that you've got there that you don't like. Okay, so let's go back down to here. This coat and so on I've got, let's have a look. I think there's a deep indigo in the Artex. Ultramarine. Okay, we've got an indigo blue here. So I'm just going to do a few bits to suggest some shape. I don't want to cover all that wash up. I just want to get into the tighter areas and suggest some shape. And the same with his trousers. Think about where creases and so on in fabric would have no light on them, and they'll be lighter, and then the bits that are closer to you may have a slight highlight or sheen on them depending on the fabric. I'm going to use a little bit of that indigo just to do under there for shadows, and the same in here. Remember, shadows don't always have to be black. you can bring all of the colours that are in around it into a shadow, because visually sometimes when you look at something that's in shadow, you are actually seeing a combination of all those colours. And for the brown, I'm going to use, let's have a look. I think I'll use a bit of sepia. Also, what the pencil does sometimes is on top of the Inktense or a watercolour sort of base, the pencil, if you don't blend it too much, just gives you that little indication of texture. The way that the pigment sort of skips over the paper that has got the Inktense on. So that can be useful too for suggesting that, you know, for example, this is wood and it's not a highly polished reflective surface like the telescope. It's still going to have some highlight and some sort of maybe dull reflection, but it's not going to be like that area is there. So talking about that area, I'm going to need to sharpen my Prismacolor here. I've got a white Prismacolor. Prismacolor is my favourite white. I just find in most situations it will work, whereas some other pencils are hit and miss. The Prismacolor generally, you know, gives you a decent sort of result. So if you think about a cylinder, something that's round, it only has the highlight in a very, very small band where the light is hitting the surface. So you don't need a huge, big band of white, but just enough to suggest that that's where the light is hitting. And of course, if we want to suggest that something is cylindrical or not flat, then we need to keep it consistent all the way along that item. And I'm going to use a little bit of that on his top hat as well there. Sometimes the top hats would be maybe satin or silk covered, so there would be a slight sheen, and the same with his lapel here, and a little bit on his leg there. I'm going to just suggest a little bit on there, not very much at all. A little bit on his lapel of his vest, and come down there because I sort of lost that a little bit. And for his vest, I'm going to use Tuscan Red, and that's just to suggest a bit of a deeper shade under the lapel there and around his button. A little bit on his shoes, a little bit in that inlay. Very, very lightly here on these doors, because again, I don't want these to be the focus, and because they would be in the distance, you're not going to see very detailed shadows, you're just going to see slight variations in the colour. If that door was right in front of you, of course you would see all that, but it's not, it's in the distance. And I wasn't able to be careful there with that big water brush that I had. So again, I'm looking at these and just evaluating that I still think he's lacking a little bit of oomph, so I'm actually going to darken that up. So in this case, I am covering a lot of that Inktense layering because I didn't go dark enough with it when I had them out, and so rather than, you know, getting it all out again, I am just using the pencil with this. I'm going to add a little bit of crimson red in here. A little bit of crimson red on his bow tie. And in this book, maybe a fraction into his shoes, a little bit into there, and a tiny bit into up here in the doors. Okay. I might actually add some gold, I think, on his teacup. Okay, just going to suggest a little bit of shadow into this area around the clock, because that's kind of getting a bit lost. And this one here is 70% warm grey. I missed this earlier. I think this might be the equivalent of that on that side. A little bit of that down here, because that's not popping enough yet. Okay, and I'm just lightly under here. That's all looking a bit flat. A little bit here under his seat. A bit under there, under his bottom and his leg. And that leg there would be behind, so that will be darker. A little bit in here. Sometimes with RJ's books, he puts a little bit of cross-hatching or line work that indicates to you where it might be a good place to either place your shadow or your highlight. So take those little cues from the artist and, you know, see whether it would in fact be a shadowed area or a highlighted area or something that really could be well placed to make a focus. A little bit into there as well. So, I mean, brass doesn't have all these colours in it, but because it is a reflective metal, it will be picking up the colours that are around it. So it's not that the actual item has those colours in it themselves, but if they're a reflective surface, then they are going to reflect various things that are around them. And they're the little things that help suggest that this thing is in fact a reflective metal or a reflective material. If I didn't put the highlight and the shade in there, it would all be very flat. It would just look like it was made of, you know, wood or fabric or something, you know, different. Now I have just touched a little tiny bit of grey into that area where I don't want it, so I'm going to use a teeny tiny electric eraser that I've got here. I purchased this from, I think it was Temu. So that's enough to take that off. I feel like the goggles would have a dark strap on them. They would have a metal around them. And what I need to do now is just sharpen this. I just need to suggest a little tiny bit of shadow underneath some of these screws and bolts. Go into some of these areas. You do need a sharp point. So just a reminder, this is the 70% warm grey. A little bit of shadow there under his hat onto his hair. A little bit more into the back of his coat here that I think would be like a black silk or satin lining. Now this is the part where you could fiddle and faff about for ages. I don't think there's a really an easy way to sort of teach someone where the finite point is, because quite often you know once you've gone past that point and you realise you should have pulled back a while ago. So I think that's something that really you learn that sort of thing by doing. So the more that you colour, the more that you practice, the more that you're going to get that instinct where you learn that you've reached the point where that's enough and you need to let it go. So what I'm going to do now is bring in some metallic pens. I've got Secura Jelly Roll Metallic, and I'm going to use a little bit of the silver, just little touches of it. I'm not doing the whole thing. Just in sort of the screws, little bits of bolts and so on that might be chrome. I haven't been able to achieve that with my colouring, so I'm just going to do it with this, because let's face it, when you can just use a little tiny bit like this, tells the story, why not? If you've got it, just use it. I'm going to go for gold on his jacket here. And I'm going to go for gold on the teacup. I'm actually just going to turn that into a band. It has got a design on it, but it's a little bit too fiddly for me, I'm afraid. Sorry, Russell, if you're watching. Might just put a little bit of gold onto just little bits. all that's going to do, it won't even show on a photograph, but what it will do is if I'm looking at the book and I'm moving it, it's just going to catch the light in a different way. And really that's enough for me, that's all I need. I'm actually going to use the silver again for his goggles. And I might go around his glasses with that because they're a bit lost. So generally I'd leave this for the end, but because I know that all this up here is too wet to do much else with, I'm going to do it now. This is the Montmartre acrylic paint pen that I have. Just going to see if that is working. Okay. And I might just do a little bit of that. I'm going to go into all the bits here now where I accidentally went over into his shirt, into the cat, on the stripes here on the cat, and I'd like to reinstate white, or at least a lighter area, into this inlay on the door. I'm barely touching that to the paper because I don't really want it bright white, but I do want it a bit lighter. I also did that around this little thing here. I got all the Inktense went over that, so we'll just touch that up. So this is where, if there's anywhere on the white building that I want to reinstate a little bit of brightness, this is where I can bring it in with the acrylic paint pen, or if you've got a Sakura Jelly Roll white, this is just where you can add some extra lights back in. Sometimes I find that it's a bit too much, so I just touch it gently with my finger to lift some of that back out. I think that might be pretty much where I need the white. Yeah. If I wanted to, this paper is still very wet, so I'm barely touching this to it, and it's not covering all of that, but it is going to help pardon me, words are hard, disguise it. And also what I find sometimes is when I use the acrylic paint pen on the damp paper, it goes on really softly, very muted. It's not really bright. Always try and remember when you're doing this where you've done the gel pen, where it might still be wet. Don't go putting your hand or your arm in it, which I quite often do. Forget what I'm doing. And I feel like I just want to put a little bit of extra white back into there, just to lighten that off a bit, where especially where the Inktense came over the roof here. Okay. I think I went a bit dark here on the lion too, so I'm just going to reinstate a little bit more lighter areas into bit there. And I'm really barely touching this. I mean, from what you're seeing on the camera there, it might be very little, but it's going to be enough in the long run. If you want some tips on how to use acrylic paint, and especially white acrylic paint to its best, I suggest you watch Dee Dee Willingham on YouTube when she does her live and she's colouring. It's great to watch her. She quite often explains how when you reinstate the whites, you don't have to leave it white like this. Once it's dry, you can actually colour over that with your marker or your pencil and knock back the whiteness, and what it does is it just reinstates that light area without the bright whiteness. And Dee Dee really does demonstrate that the best of anybody that I've ever seen explain it or demonstrate it. She's really a brilliant artist. So I highly recommend you go check her out if you need some ideas on how to incorporate some. I'll put that away, and I need it. You know, if you want to incorporate some acrylic paint, definitely, but ideas of how to sort of lighten things up and get great results, do go check her out because she is brilliant. I'm going to add some silver in up here. I'm thinking that I'd like, you know, probably in reality the flagpoles would be white, but because I've got so much white happening in the buildings, I'm just going for the silver on there. I also think that there might be silver or chrome railings. So I'm going to add that in there. I also think the doorknobs might be silver. You could use gold, or any of your metallics that you've got would be adequate for doing that. Just, you know, if you've got a theme going, match it to the colours that you've got. You know, go for the one that suits it best. I'm thinking the lion on the door, I'd like him to be gold, like a great big huge gold door knocker. So I'm trying not to annihilate all of the details, so I'm just touching that into there. And I think I'll even do that around the... So I'm trying not to lose the line work. If you do, you can always use a black pen, like a Pigma Micron pen or a Sharpie fine liner pen. Don't use a Sharpie permanent marker, but a fine liner pen. Any sort of black fine liner pen, you can reinstate those lines if you need to. I'm going to come back to the lion here because I feel like he's just that little bit boring being just grey and white. So I'm going to introduce a little bit. This is a yellowish grey. Just to introduce another little bit of colour in there other than white. And that will be enough. And again, that colour will be great for dirty sort of white. There's a bit of a column here that looks like it needs to come forward. So if I use this, it makes this bit go to the background and that column to come forward a little bit. Might be hard to see now, but I will lift the book up for you at the end. Okay, I haven't quite got finished here, but this is turning out to be quite a long video. It's taken me longer than I thought it would, to be honest. I'm going to use cool grey now just to knock that little bit there back. And just to add in some sort of shadows in the edges of the paving. I need to do something for the surround there and the vine. So the vine I'm going to go for, I might actually just use a different green. We might go for fern green. And what I'm doing here is just varying the pressure, so very dark in some bits, lighter in others. The bits that are sort of here at the front going over the top would be lighter, and the bits coming from behind are going to be darker. And because this is not the feature of the drawing or the image, I am not going to make this detailed at all. It's going to be very rough. There'll be bits of white showing, and it's just to add the colour, it's not for interest. I'm just going to put a little bit of that colour there under that archway, a little bit there under that step, to the doorway, a little bit in the shadow there. And you can see there's no great care being taken here. This is just roughly being done. And that's behind the telescope there, so that's why I'm doing that darker. Same for that little bit there, just to send the telescope forward a little bit more. A little bit. This isn't quite dry up here, so I can't really add a lot of pencil to that at this stage because that paper is still so incredibly wet. Okay, we need something going on down here. I'm going to just use some of the Inktense. We'll go back to neutral grey. There you go. I've wet that and made it quite wet. And I'm going to let that bleed. And I'm going to get the amber and the mustard. And I've just got that all over my hand. Oops. So I've got amber and mustard here, and I'm going to put that in to blend with the neutral grey. And this is not thought out, this is random. And here comes a little bit of amber. And that's bleeding, it's very random. And I'm skimming the brush across the paper so that it's barely touching in some areas. And what I'm wanting is that textured look. Sometimes it helps if you keep the 3 pencils in your hand and then you just keep lifting a bit of colour from each, and it is totally random then. You know, you're not controlling that at all. But what it is a selection of all of the colour and not just one. Okay. I feel like there's a lot to sort of be done there with some greys and so on still, but because that is so wet up there, I'm really, really loath to touch it at the moment. Quite happy with the rest of it. I still got to do a colour on his band on his top hat, so I think I might do that with the Shiraz. And I'm going to have an avalanche of pencils here. So do that into his hat band. And that would be showing through a little bit there. We need something on here, so I've got mustard in my hand, so it's going to be mustard. Let's just strengthen that up as well. Let's just strengthen up the T. This is amber, a little bit on the cat. He's got a little bit of tongue, tiny bit of tongue that's showing, so I'm just going to use that Shiraz there undiluted. So what I might do is just lift that up to you. You can see there those little bits of silver are reflecting. So I really need to wait for that background sky to dry now. If I can't work out how to patch together the extra video, I'll come back with a very short part 3 to go with this one. But I'm quite happy with the way that's coming along. I think that's working quite well. Okay, so I'll say goodbye for now. If I can, I'll splice a video onto the end of this one, and if not, it will be a short part 3. Thank you for watching. See you soon.